Hey, welcome back to Living the Five. I am so glad that you've joined us for another week. I hope that you and your community group or your family are just having a great time doing this study together, and that God is helping you grow in your faith. You know, all five of these principles, they're important. They're part of our core DNA here at Stillwater. They help define who we are as Christians and who we are as a church. You need all five of these things because they help us stay balanced in life. It's not like we just get to pick one or two or three of them and emphasize those. God calls us to each one of them. Have you ever driven a car that was out of alignment? You know, you can be on a flat, straight road, but that car wants to pull to the right or pull to the left, and you have to constantly be correcting it. That's what our lives look like if we're not living out all five of these. We can get out of balance. So let God use this study to bring you back into balance a bit. You know, one of the things that we're looking at in it's this week's principle, is the fact that saved people serve people. Saved people serve people. See, when Jesus comes into our lives and He changes us, He saves us, our natural response is that we want to serve others. Because Jesus gave His life for us, so we want to give our lives in serving for others. You know, there are many, many examples of this. I'm back here at Christ the King Anglican Church this week. You might remember from last week's study that this was the church formerly known as Riverdale, which is the church that Stillwater used to be before we moved to our current locations. So back in the day, Stillwater had been here. Then we sold the building and on a land contract and moved on to our facility. Seeing as it was a land contract, that meant that the church here would continue to pay us. We had agreed upon amount plus some interest that they would pay us, just like a typical mortgage or land contract would work. Well, one time at one of our board meetings, a board member came in and came and brought a Bible verse that said that Christians or followers of God should not charge other followers of God interest. And the board looked at this and said, "What are we doing? Why is it that we're charging this interest when the Bible says we shouldn't be doing this?" And so they made a decision, and it was a bold decision because at the time our finances weren't very good. We had a new building, we had been expanding, we had mortgage to pay, staff to pay, all of that. But we decided that this was the right thing to do. That if God was called, and this would be a way for us to answer God's call to serve this church right here, to be generous, to not charge that interest, and to serve them by doing so that they could have more money to put into their ministry here. You know, as we look back, that was one of our most important decisions back in those days, a time where we recognized the fact that we're called to be faithful to God in all aspects of our church's life, and we're called to serve others, to be as generous as possible with others. You know, there are companies out there that are just known for their customer service. You probably have some that you frequent yourself, and they just have great service. It always makes you feel good. Chick-fil-A has stories on their website where they'll tell, where customers can tell of just great service examples that they've experienced with the staff. In one of these stories, a person was visiting Chick-fil-A, eating there, and he accidentally threw his cell phone away. You ever done that? It's not a pretty sight. You leave it on the tray and you dump it in the trash. And so he was there, and the phone was expensive. It was important to him, so he needed to get it out. And he started to kind of look through the trash. One of the workers saw him and came over. The guy thought the worker was going to scold him, but instead the worker came over, had the guy step aside, and the worker dug through that trash, all that nastiness, until he found the person's cell phone. On top of that, the worker then gave the guy a free ice cream cone as he left the store. You can bet he'll never forget that service. That really means a lot when folks go out of their way to show kindness. You know, as Christians, though, we shouldn't have to look to just to restaurants for our example. We've got so many examples in the church, but best of all, we have Jesus, our Savior. And Jesus came down from heaven, and what did He say? The Son of Man did not come to be served, but instead to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many. So that's what Jesus did. He's our role model as to how we should live. And so when we say that we've been saved, then the natural next step is that we should be serving others. Saved people serve people. Serving others can take on lots of forms. At Stillwater, you may never have to rummage through the trash or do that kind of stuff, but there's all sorts of ways you can get your hands dirty around here. We have folks who get their hands dirty in landscaping every year to keep our place looking good. Folks who clean things. Folks who take out the trash and clean up after events. Folks who love on babies and children. Folks who go on mission trips with teenagers. Folks who go to Tijuana or someday to Cuba. Folks who set out donuts every Sunday morning. Folks who greet. Folks who sing in the praise team. Folks who do all sorts of different things. These are just a few of the countless opportunities that we have to serve at Stillwater. You know, once we've encountered the power of Jesus in our lives, it's natural for us to serve others. And we see that example throughout our church. We can also serve by showing kindness and hospitality. Consider the story of Priscilla and Aquila from Acts chapter 18. This couple were friends of Paul's, and they were leaders of the early church. They even sailed to Ephesus with Paul on one of his missionary journeys. And while they were there, they heard of a young man named Apollos who was speaking about Jesus. Here's where the story picks up in verse 24. Apollos was a learned man who had thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor and talked about Jesus accurately, though he only knew the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of the Lord more adequately. See, here's the deal. You didn't have the Bible back then. It hadn't been all put together. And so Apollos was right on many things, and he was full of passion and zeal. His heart was in the right place, but he had some of his facts wrong. He wasn't telling the whole story. And I love this story because of what Priscilla and Aquila didn't do. They didn't condemn him. They didn't tell him he needed to stop. They didn't just give him some book and say, here, go read this, and hopefully you'll get with the program. No, instead they invited him to their home so they could build a relationship and they could privately instruct him. It wasn't about embarrassing him or making themselves look smarter. It was about making him so much better so that the church would be better. It's an attitude of service that says, the focus, it's not on me. The focus is on God. And guess what happened through this humble, thoughtful couple? In the next verses we read that after the time of learning, Apollos went on to visit another town and to teach from there. The chapter ends by saying this: on arriving, Apollos was a great help to those who by grace had believed. For he vigorously refuted the Jews in public debate, proving from the Scriptures that Jesus was the Christ. Imagine how different it would have been if Apollos hadn't had his life impacted by Priscilla and Aquila. Their servant's heart helped him to learn more about Jesus, and he grew in faith so much that he became a powerful preacher. Who knows how many people came to Christ because of Apollos? The Bible doesn't say. But in an effect, or in a way, by the service of Priscilla and Aquila, it had just as much effect on those people who Apollos preached to as Apollos did himself, because they had set him up to be able to do that. That's how serving works. We do what we can to build God's kingdom, to use the gifts and graces that God has given us. And God takes those things and he multiplies them to build his kingdom. And everybody has something to give. Every single person watching this video can be used by God to serve other people. After all, we are commanded to get off of the bench and into the game, and God always equips us for what he calls us to do. Here's the secret about serving, though. You'll bless yourself as much or more than you'll bless anybody else. You see, Jesus didn't tell us to serve because it's the right thing to do, although that would have been enough. He wants us to serve other people because it's a key to having a joyful, fulfilled life. In John chapter 10, Jesus says that he has come to bring life and to bring it to the fullest. Some translations call this abundant life. Jesus knew that we were created to serve others and will never be our best until we learn to give ourselves away. When saved people serve people, both get a blessing. So how about you? Have you found your place to serve at Stillwater, to use your gifts and talents to serve others? Are you open to serving behind the scenes like Priscilla and Aquila with nothing more important than just making God look good? Maybe there's even something you as a group can do together. Take some time to consider how you're gifted and how you can experience the deep joy that comes through using these gifts. You know, we've got a great serving opportunities guide that we've got in the Connection Center. We'd love to meet you there to help you find a place. If you've never found a place to serve, or if you're looking for a new place to serve, we would love to help you get connected, because saved people serve people.